The girl in the dirt. The wind was sharp and dry across the barren wasteland, carrying grains of sand that stung the skin like tiny needles. Captain Ray Mercer walked slowly, scanning the ground for anything useful. His ship was low on supplies, and this abandoned stretch of the outer rim was the last place he had expected to find life. The sun above was harsh, burning down on the cracked earth, and the silence pressed heavy on his ears. Then something caught his eye, a small shape, half buried in the dirt, unmoving. At first, he thought it was debris or an old piece of clothing. But then the shape shifted slightly. It was a person, no, a child. Ray's heart kicked hard in his chest. He moved quickly, kneeling beside the figure. Dust covered her face, her hair tangled and matted with dirt. Her skin was pale blue, faintly shining under the sun, and her small frame trembled with every weak breath. She was alive, but barely. Hey. Stay with me, Ray said softly, brushing the dirt away from her face. Her eyes fluttered open large, bright, and filled with fear. They were unlike any eyes he had seen before. Glowing faintly, like moonlight caught in water, her lips moved. But the sound that came out was strange, a soft murmur in a language he didn't understand. Ray slipped his arms under her. Lifting her gently, she weighed almost nothing. Her small hands limp against his chest, but then, as if finding sudden strength, she grabbed his uniform. Her fingers clutching tight, her lips moved again, this time forming words in broken, halting English. Don't let them take me back, she whispered, her voice trembling like she was speaking her last words. Ray froze. It wasn't just the fear in her voice, it was the way she said them, like the word itself carried pain. He looked around the empty wasteland, his soldier's instincts telling him they weren't alone. There was no time to ask questions. He shifted her weight and began moving quickly toward where his ship was hidden behind a ridge. Every step sent puffs of dust into the air. The girl buried her face against him, her breathing fast and uneven. Ray could feel her trembling through the fabric of his jacket halfway to the ridge. His comm unit crackled. Unidentified vessel. Detected in restricted zone, an alien voice hissed through the static. Ray's grip on her tightened. They must have picked up his ship's signal or maybe hers. He moved faster, ignoring the ache in his legs. The ground was rough and uneven, and twice he almost stumbled, each time. The girl clung tighter to him, whispering something in her language that sounded like a prayer. Finally, the ship came in two. View a battered old freighter, but still capable of lifting off in seconds. He climbed the ramp, hit the controls to seal the hatch, and set her down gently on a padded bench. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Ray knelt in front of her. Meeting her eyes, "You're safe now," he said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. She shook her head weakly. "No." "They find me?" Always. Ray was about to ask who they were when his scanner lit up multiple contacts, moving fast toward his position. His heart pounded. She was right. Whoever she was running from had already found them. The engines roared to life. Shaking the ship as Ray pushed the throttle forward, the freighter lifted off. Dust swirling violently below. Through the rear sensors, he saw a small craft skimming low over the desert. Following his trail, the girl's eyes widened. "Hunters," she breathed, the word heavy with terror. Ray angled the ship toward the jagged canyon ahead, using the rock walls to block the enemy's line of sight. The narrow path forced him to fly dangerously close to the stone, but he had no choice. The girl crawled closer to the cockpit, watching the radar with fearful eyes. Then she lifted her wrist, showing him a faintly glowing mark embedded in her skin. "They track me," she said, her voice breaking. Ray understood instantly it wasn't his ship they had locked onto. It was her. He glanced at the mark. Then back at the radar, the contacts were gaining. "Hold still," he said, pulling a combat. Knife from his belt, her eyes went wide with fear, but he spoke quickly. "Not to hurt you, just the tracker." He took her wrist gently, pressing the knife's edge against the metal embedded in her skin. With one quick motion, he pried it free, tossing the small glowing chip into the canyon below. Seconds later, the radar showed the enemy ships slowing. Confused, Ray allowed himself a small breath of relief. But when he looked at her again, she wasn't watching the radar. She was staring at him, tears in her eyes, in a voice so quiet he almost didn't hear it. She whispered, "You didn't give me back." The words hit him harder than any battle wound. Ray didn't answer. He couldn't. He just kept flying, the canyon stretching ahead. In that moment, he knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting her, no matter what it cost. The freighter shot out of the canyon, climbing fast into the dusty sky. Ray's hands gripped the controls tightly, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. Behind him, the alien girl sat small and silent, her knees pulled to her chest. Her wide eyes never left the small screen showing the radar. For a moment, it was empty. For a moment, he thought maybe the tracker's removal had worked. Then the radar beeped again, sharp and fast. Multiple signals were rising from the canyon floor. The hunters had split into smaller craft, each one spreading out to cover more ground. They always find me," she whispered, almost like it was a curse. Ray glanced at her. "Not today," he said, pushing the throttle to maximum. The freighter roared forward, shaking under the strain. Its old engines weren't built for speed. But Ray knew every trick to squeeze more power out of her. The barren desert below gave way to cracked plains. Then two dark forests that looked like jagged claws from the air. He kept the ship low, weaving between treetops, forcing the hunters to navigate around obstacles. A flash of red light passed the cockpit energy fire. One of the hunters' ships had locked onto them. The girl gasped and gripped the edge of her seat as Ray dove the freighter lower. Skimming just above the trees, branches scraped the underside. But it kept them alive. He hit a switch, releasing a burst of flares, and the hunter's shot exploded harmlessly behind them. Ray's comm unit buzzed to life, a deep alien voice speaking in a harsh language. The girl's eyes widened. "They say, turn the property, or we burn your ship." Ray's jaw tightened. "You're not property," he said sharply. She looked down at her feet, her voice trembling. "To them, I am." The forest ended abruptly, opening to a vast stretch of swamp. Ray angled the freighter up, lifting high into the clouds. The hunters followed. But their formation had loosened. Some ships stayed low. Some tried to cut them off above. It was exactly what Ray wanted. He flipped a hidden switch on the console, activating a set of old but powerful rear-mounted boosters. The freighter leaped forward with sudden speed, leaving the nearest hunters far behind. For a brief second, the girl's lips curved into the smallest smile, but it faded as she looked over her shoulder at the radar again. Two hunters were still on their tail, refusing to break off. "They never stop," she said, her voice almost breaking. Ray met her gaze. "Then neither will I." He angled toward a narrow mountain pass, the peaks jagged and sharp. The freighter scraped close to the rock walls, the space barely wide enough for them to fit. The hunters followed. But Ray knew this terrain. He had flown it years ago during a smuggling job. He banked sharply around a turn, and one of the hunters clipped a rock face, exploding in a flash of light. The girl gasped, clutching the arm of her seat. "One left," Ray said under his breath. The last hunter pressed closer, firing shot after shot. Sparks flew across the cockpit as one blast grazed the freighter's side. Warning lights flashed red. "Hold on," Ray shouted, diving down the narrow canyon. He twisted the ship sideways through a thin gap in the rock. The hunter tried to follow, but the gap was too tight. The pursuing craft smashed into the cliff wall in a burst of fire and smoke. Silence filled the cockpit except for the hum of the freighter's engines. Ray eased the throttle back, letting the ship drift higher into the thin, cold air above the mountains. The girl stared at him, her breathing still quick. You could have given me to them, and they would stop chasing, she said softly. Ray turned in his seat to face her. Yeah, but I wouldn't be able to look in the mirror again. She didn't speak for a long moment. Her small hands twisted. In her lap, her gaze fixed on the floor. Then, almost too quiet to hear, she whispered, "No one has ever chosen me before." Ray's throat felt tight, but he forced a small smile. Well, it's a first time for everything, he checked. The radar again, no signals for now. But he knew they would be back. Whoever these hunters were, they had resources, and they clearly wanted her badly enough to risk dangerous terrain. He pulled a blanket from the storage compartment and draped it over her small frame. "You should rest," he said. "We've got a long way before we're safe." Her eyes met his for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. She curled up on the bench. Pulling the blanket tight, her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't fully sleep, even in half-rest. She flinched at every sound. It was the kind of fear that came from years of running. Ray sat in the cockpit, watching the stars appear beyond the glass. He didn't know yet who she was or why she was hunted, but he knew one thing: he had made her a promise, and Ray Mercer was a man who kept his promises far in the distance, deep in the black of space. Faint blips appeared on the long-range scanner. They were still coming. Ray's grip on the controls tightened. The chase wasn't over, had only just begun. Hours passed in the quiet hum of the freighter. The alien girl sat wrapped in the blanket, her eyes half closed, but Ray knew she wasn't sleeping. Every few minutes, she would glance toward the cockpit window, as if expecting enemy ships to appear at any moment. Ray had seen that kind of look before on soldiers who had lived too long in war zones. It was the look of someone who never truly relaxed. Finally, he broke the silence. "You want to tell me who's chasing you?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the edge of the blanket, and her gaze stayed on the floor. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "You wouldn't believe me." Ray leaned back in his chair. "Try me." She lifted her head just enough to meet his eyes, and there was something in her stare, something heavy. "I'm not supposed to exist?" she whispered. The words sent a strange chill through him. She explained slowly, as if each word cost her strength. Her people had strict laws about what kind of children were allowed to live. Any child born different was taken away before their first day was over. Ray felt his jaw tighten. Different how? Her hands clenched the blanket. "I can feel things in people. I can take away pain. And I can give it back." She told him her parents had hidden her in secret. Far from the cities, for years, they kept her safe. But when she was 8, the hunters came. Her voice shook when she spoke of that night, the crash of doors, the shouting, the sound of her mother's voice crying out. Ray didn't interrupt. She said she ran, just like her parents told her to, by the time she stopped running. They were gone. Ray leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and, "You've been on your own since then?" She nodded. "Sometimes strangers helped me, but when the hunters came, they all gave me back." Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought maybe you would too." Ray felt something twist inside him, a deep, angry ache. "I'm not giving you to anyone," he said firmly. Her gaze searched his face, as if testing if he meant it. But then her voice dropped even lower, almost too soft to hear. "They don't just want me because I'm different," she said. "They want to use me." She explained that her gift, the power to touch someone and change what they felt, could heal soldiers in seconds or break the strongest minds. With her, an army could fight forever, never tiring, never falling to pain, or she could be used to make enemies destroy themselves from within. Ray's stomach turned. That's why they're hunting you. She gave a small nod. I'm dangerous to them. But I'm more dangerous for them. Ray rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the weight of what she was saying. This wasn't just a lost child, she was a living weapon, and the wrong hands could burn entire worlds with her. Suddenly, the console beeped, pulling him back to the present. It was the long-range scanner. 3 contacts had just entered the sector. Moving fast, her hands gripped the bench, her voice tight. They're here. Ray stood, moving to the navigation panel, not for long. He plotted a course to a cluster of asteroid fields nearby. It wasn't much, but it would give them cover. The girl followed him to the cockpit, her steps quiet. You're not afraid? She asked. He gave her a quick smile. I've been hunted before, just never with company this small. The freighter's engines roared as they dove into the asteroid field. Weaving between massive chunks of rock, the hunters followed. But their larger ships struggled to keep pace. Ray pulled hard on the controls, sliding the freighter into a narrow gap that the enemy ships couldn't fit through. One of the hunters broke apart on impact with an asteroid, the explosion lighting up the darkness. The girl's eyes widened. You're good at this, Ray shrugged. I've had practice staying alive. They slipped deeper into the asteroid field, eventually losing the other 2 hunters on the scanners. For the moment, they were safe again. Ray set the ship to autopilot and leaned back. The girl stayed standing beside him, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond the glass. After a long pause, she whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Ray thought for a moment before answering. Because when I found you in the dirt, you looked at me like I was your last chance, he said, and I don't walk away from that. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, she simply nodded and sat back down, for the first time since he had found her. She let her head rest on the wall and closed her eyes. Ray knew she wasn't asleep, but maybe, just maybe, she felt safe enough to pretend. Outside, the asteroids drifted in silent darkness. Inside, a promise had been made and spoken, but unbreakable. Ray didn't know how long he could keep the hunters away, but he knew this much: he wouldn't let them take her. Not while he was breathing. The asteroid field faded behind them, and for a few precious hours the scanners stayed clear. Ray allowed himself to breathe easier, but he knew better than to think it was over. The hunters would regroup, and they would come again. He needed fuel, food, and a plan. That's when the distress signal came through, sharp, urgent, and on a civilian channel. Ray tapped the console, bringing up the message. A man's voice crackled through static. This is Station Delta 5. We've taken damage from debris, requesting immediate assistance to avoid total systems failure. The coordinates were close, less than a few hours away. Ray leaned back in his chair, thinking. The girl was curled up in the corner, watching him silently. Her eyes narrowed. Don't go, she said suddenly. Ray frowned. Why not? Her voice was tense. That station. It's not real. He turned toward her. Not real? You mean the signal's fake? She nodded. It's them. They've done this before. Make it sound like someone needs help. Wait for people to land, then take them. Ray studied her face, trying to tell if this was fear talking or fact. The certainty in her voice told him it was the latter. Still, the signal kept repeating, and every instinct in Ray's soldier-trained mind screamed that ignoring it was wrong. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the navigation controls. The girl stood now, her small hands clutching the back of his seat. If you go, they'll catch you. And me? Ray gave her a tight smile. Then I'll just have to make sure that doesn't happen. The station came into views, small, metallic, and spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. From a distance, it looked harmless, even pitiful. But Ray noticed details. The docking bay was already open, lights bright, like they were ready and waiting. The girl's breathing quickened. "I know this place," she whispered. "It's where they kept me before I escaped." Ray's grip tightened on the controls. He considered turning away, but part of him needed to see if she was right. The freighter eased toward the docking bay. The ship's sensors scanning for hidden weapons. Nothing obvious appeared, but Ray's gut churned with unease. The moment the freighter touched down inside the bay, heavy doors slammed shut behind them with a deep metallic clang. Red warning lights flashed, and the sound of locking clamps echoed through the hull. Ray swore under his breath. The girl's hands were shaking, her voice sharp. "I told you." The airlock hissed open before Ray could seal it. Figures stepped through, armored, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. The leader's voice boomed in a deep, alien tone. "Step away from the asset, human." Ray moved instantly, stepping in front of the girl, his stance wide and solid. "She's not your asset," he growled. Two of the armored figures stepped forward, weapons raised. The leader tilted his head. "Do not make this harder than it has to be. Surrender her, and you may leave unharmed." The girl's voice was barely a breath. "Please, don't let go." Ray's mind raced. There were too many to fight head-on, and they were blocking the only exit. Then he noticed something there. Formation was tight, overconfident. If he could disrupt them for just a few seconds, he might have a chance. He reached slowly toward his belt, pretending to comply. But instead of drawing a weapon, he triggered a small smoke charge from his jacket pocket. The bay filled with thick, choking fog in seconds. Ray grabbed the girl's hand and moved fast. Weaving between the confused hunters, blasts of energy lit up the smoke, but none found their mark. The girl clung to him, her small feet barely keeping up. They reached a maintenance hatch on the far side of the bay. Ray kicked it open and shoved her through, following close behind. The narrow tunnel echoed with the sounds of shouting behind them. Ray's voice was calm but urgent. "Keep moving. Don't stop." They crawled through the cramped passage, emerging into a small service room. From there, Ray found a secondary control panel with quick, practiced motions. He unlocked the docking clamps remotely. The freighter was free, but getting to it would be the hard part. The hunters would already be regrouping at the main bay. Ray looked at the girl, her eyes wide but determined, ready to run. He asked. She gave a single nod. "Always." They burst out of the service room into a side corridor. The ship wasn't far now, just 2 turns away. But as they rounded the first corner, more armored figures appeared ahead. Ray drew his blaster, firing without hesitation, forcing them to dive for cover. The girl darted ahead, slipping past while they were distracted. One hunter lunged at her, but she dropped to the floor and rolled. Sliding under his reach, Ray caught up to her, grabbing her hand again. As they sprinted the last stretch, they reached the freighter's ramp, slammed the hatch shut, and powered up the engines. The freighter's engines screamed as Ray pushed them beyond safe limits. The stars streaked past the cockpit glass, but the sense of safety was an illusion. Behind them, the hunters had regrouped, and 3 fast interceptors were closing in. Ray's jaw tightened. "They're not letting go," he muttered. The alien girl sat strapped into the co-pilot's seat, her small hands gripping the armrests. Her eyes darted between the radar and Ray's face. "They will keep coming," she said quietly. "They don't stop until one of us is dead." Ray glanced at her. "Then it won't be us." A red light flashed on the console. Hit. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring. The impact had ripped through the port engine housing, slowing them down. Ray tried to compensate, weaving through a debris field to shake the pursuers. The hunters followed without hesitation, firing again. Another blast rocked the freighter, throwing the girl against her seatbelt. She gasped, her voice trembling. "Ray?" "Something's leaking." He glanced at the gauge's fuel. The damage was worse than he thought. Ray knew they couldn't outrun the hunters now. He cut the main engines and let the freighter drift into the shadow of a massive asteroid. The hunters overshot, scanning ahead. It bought them only seconds, but seconds were enough. Ray grabbed his rifle and checked the charge. "I need to go outside and fix the leak before we burn through the last fuel we have," he said. The girl shook her head sharply. "No, they'll see you. They'll kill you." He gave her a faint smile. "Not if you keep watch and tell me the moment they turn around." He moved quickly, sealing his helmet and stepping out into the cold black. The silence of space was complete, broken only by his own breathing. His gloved hands worked fast, patching the torn line inside. The girl's voice came through the comm. "Ray, they're turning." He had no time. He leaped back toward the airlock, sealing it just as the freighter jolted from weapons fire. The hunters had found them. The ship spun under the assault, alarms screaming. Ray stumbled into the cockpit and threw himself into the pilot's seat. The girl was pale, clutching her side. Blood stained the edge of her tunic. Ray's voice was sharp. "You're hit." She shook her head. "It's not bad." "Keep flying." But it was bad. The scorch mark on her side was deep. She swayed in her seat, her breathing ragged. Ray's anger flared at the hunters. At himself, he slammed the controls forward, sending the freighter into a wild spin. The maneuver threw the hunters off balance, but one stayed locked on them. Ray couldn't keep up this dance forever. He needed an opening. The girl's hand reached for his arm. Weak but steady. "I can help," she said. Her voice was soft, but sure. Ray glanced at her. "You need to rest." "No," she cut in. "I can stop them." For a moment. "But you must finish it." Before he could stop her, she unbuckled and moved toward the back of the ship. Ray cursed under his breath, trying to keep the freighter steady while watching her disappear into the corridor. Moments later, the ship's sensors picked up something strange, an energy surge, but not from the engines. The girl's faint silhouette appeared on the rear camera feed, standing near the airlock, her hand pressed against the wall. Her skin glowed faintly, the light spreading through the metal and the void behind them. The pursuing hunter ship suddenly swerved its weapons, going silent. Inside its cockpit, the crew clutched their helmets, thrashing as if struck by invisible pain. Ray didn't know how she was doing it, but it was working. He seized the chance, firing the freighter's main guns. The blasts tore through the hunter's hull, and the ship exploded in a bloom of fire and debris. The girl collapsed to her knees, the glow fading from her skin. Ray ran to her, catching her before she hit the floor. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Told you. I can help." He held her close, his chest tight. "You scared me half to death." She gave the smallest smile. "Now we're even." He carried her back to the co-pilot's seat, strapping her in gently. Her breathing steadied, but her eyelids were heavy. Ray knew using her power had cost her. The freighter floated in the silent dark. Their enemies gone for now. Ray looked out at the stars, his mind already planning their next move. The hunters would return, and when they did, they'd come harder. But now he knew something he hadn't. Before, she wasn't just someone to protect, she was someone who could fight beside him. He reached over, adjusting the blanket around her. "Get some rest," he said. His voice softer now, her lips moved, barely forming words. "Don't leave me. I'm not going anywhere," he promised. And for the first time since he'd found her in the dirt, felt like they might actually stand a chance. The freighter drifted quietly through the black. No hunters on the radar. No urgent alarms screaming through the cockpit. But the comm was thin, fragile, like glass ready to break. Ray stayed in the pilot's seat, eyes scanning the stars, waiting for trouble to reappear behind him. The alien girl stirred. She shifted under the blanket, opening her eyes slowly, Her voice was soft but steady. "How long was I out?" "Not long," Ray replied, glancing back at her, "long enough to scare me." She sat up slowly, wincing at the soreness in her side. "I told you, I can help," she said, her small hands curling into fists. Ray turned in his seat, leaning. "On the armrest, you call nearly killing yourself help." Her gaze didn't waver. "I didn't nearly kill myself. That's just what happens when I use too much." Ray frowned. "Too much of what?" She hesitated, her eyes dropping to her lap. When she finally spoke, the words were almost a whisper. "My gift." She explained that she was born with a rare ability. She could touch another being and feel their pain, physical and emotional, like it was her own. More than that, she could take it away, heal wounds in seconds, calm a storm of fear in someone's mind. But the power worked both ways. She could also give pain, make someone's body feel like it was breaking, even without leaving a mark. Ray leaned back slowly, his mind replaying the moment she had stopped the hunter ship in its tracks. "That's what you did out there," he said quietly. "You hit them." Inside their heads, she nodded, her voice small. "It's why my people are afraid of me." Her fingers twisted the edge of the blanket. "They say it's dangerous, unnatural. So children like me are taken away when we're born." Ray felt a sharp anger burn in his chest. "They were going to kill you because you can heal people." She gave a humorless smile. "Or because I can break them." "Maybe both." He shook his head. "They're not afraid of you because you're dangerous. They're afraid because they can't control you." Her eyes lifted to his, searching his face as if weighing whether to believe him. "No one's ever said that before," she admitted. The moment was cut short by the sound of a faint ping. On the radar, Ray's eyes narrowed. One contact, small, distant, but closing fast. "Hunter?" she asked quickly. Ray checked the signal. "No." "Wrong transponder code. Looks like a civilian scout," but something about it bothered him. Civilian ships didn't usually patrol this far out. He kept the freighter on its slow course, watching. As the contact moved closer, when it was close enough, a come signal came through. "This is the scout vessel Veil Runner, requesting permission to dock. We have no weapons, only news." Ray didn't like surprises. "What kind of news?" he asked through the comm. The voice on the other end hesitated. "It's about the girl you're carrying." The alien girl froze in her seat. Ray's hand tightened on the comm switch. "You're going to have to be more specific." The voice spoke again, quieter this time. "They're not going to stop, Mercer. And they've put a bounty so high that whole fleets will come after her." Ray's heart sank. This changed everything. A few hunters he could deal with, but if every desperate captain in the sector wanted the reward, they'd be hunted day and night. The girl's voice trembled. "You see? I told you. They'll never stop." Ray turned to her. "Then we stop them first." She blinked at him, confused. "How?" He gave a small smile. "By making you too dangerous to take." She stared at him, not sure what he meant. Ray continued. "You've been running your whole life, but what if you learned to use your gift without hurting yourself? What if the next time they came, you were ready?" For the first time since he'd met her, a flicker of hope crossed her face. "You'd teach me?" Ray nodded. "I can teach you how to fight. The rest you already have inside you." Before she could answer, the radar beeped again. 2 more ships, different angles, both closing fast. The scout ship broke comm contact, vanishing from the scanner. Ray's jaw tightened. Guess they weren't here for friendly news after all. He powered up the engines, feeling the hum of the freighter come alive under his hands. The girl's eyes narrowed. "What do you need me to do?" Ray glanced at her, a small but fierce smile on his face. "Stay ready. We're not running this time." She nodded, her hands gripping the armrests. For the first time, she didn't look scared. She looked ready. Ray angled the freighter, Toward the incoming ships, the hunters thought they were chasing prey, but this time they were flying straight into a trap. The two hunter ships closed in fast, their engines burning bright against the dark. Ray sat in the pilot's seat, calm but focused. Beside him, the alien girl was strapped in, her small hands resting on the armrests. Ready? There was no fear. In her eyes, this time, only determination. "Remember what we talked about?" Ray said, keeping his voice steady. She nodded. "I don't have to break them. Just make them hesitate." "Exactly," Ray replied. "Give me a few seconds, and I'll do the rest." The hunters opened fire, red streaks of energy cutting across the void. Ray rolled the freighter hard to the left, skimming close to a drifting asteroid. The shots missed by meters, lighting the rock surface in brief flashes. The girl closed her eyes, her breathing slow and steady. Ray could feel something in the air, a strange hum, like the air before a storm on the enemy. Ship's pilots suddenly faltered. Their grips loosened, their aim wavered. One reached for his helmet, shaking his head as if trying to clear a fog. That was all Ray needed. He spun the freighter. Firing both forward cannons, one hunter ship exploded in a burst of fire, debris scattering into the dark. The second hunter tried to break off, but the girl's power reached it too. Ray locked onto the engine core and fired. The blast tore through the rear thrusters, sending the ship spinning helplessly away. In seconds, the fight was over. The radar showed nothing but empty space. The girl's glow faded, and she slumped back in her seat, breathing hard but smiling faintly. "You did it," Ray said. Glancing at her, her eyes opened. "No, we did it." Ray set the freighter's course away from the battle zone. The hum of the engines was steady again, and the stars stretched endlessly ahead. For a while, neither of them spoke. It was the kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was full of the things they didn't need to say out loud. Finally, the girl broke it. "Where will we go now?" Ray thought for a moment, then answered, "Somewhere they can't find us. Somewhere you can live without running." Her voice was small. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I go where you go." Her eyes shimmered, and she turned away for a second, wiping them quickly. When she looked back at him, her voice was steady. "You're my family now." Ray felt a lump in his throat. He had been many things in his life: soldier, pilot, drifter, but family was never one of them. Until now, they traveled for days, slipping through quiet star systems and old trade routes. Ray avoided busy ports, keeping them far from the reach of bounty hunters. Finally, they reached a hidden colony, small, built into the cliffs of a green world far from major routes. It was a place Ray knew from old days, a place where strangers could disappear if they needed to. The people there were cautious at first, but when they saw the girl's healing gift, their doubt turned to welcome. She helped an injured miner within minutes of landing, her glow soft and warm. The man's pain faded instantly, and whispers spread quickly through the settlement. They didn't see her as dangerous. They saw her as hope. That night, Ray and the girl sat on the edge of the colony's cliff, looking out over the dark forest below. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of strange flowers. "You could stay here," Ray said. "Be safe. Have a life." She looked at him, her voice firm. "Only if you stay too." Ray chuckled softly. "Guess that makes my choice easy." In the days that followed, the hunters never came. Maybe they gave up. Maybe they were too busy chasing other targets. Or maybe, Ray thought, they had learned that some prey wasn't worth the fight. The girl trained every day, learning control over her gift, using it to help without draining herself. She laughed more often, slept more deeply. The shadows in her eyes began to fade. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise over the horizon, she spoke again. "Do you remember the day you found me?" Ray nodded, like it was yesterday. She smiled. "I was in the dirt, and I thought it was the end. But then you picked me up." Her voice softened, "and you didn't give me back." Ray looked at her, the light of the moons in her eyes. "I never will," he said simply. She leaned against him, and for the first time, she truly looked at peace in the quiet of that alien night. With stars above and the sound of wind in the trees, they both knew something. They weren't running anymore. They had stopped being just a man and a lost alien girl. They were something stronger. They were family.